Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to do a little Lightroom tutorial. So I'm pretty new to YouTube. This is just my third video, but I've been on Instagram for quite some time. My handle is Dine Fash, and I'm going to link all of my information down below for you guys. I post a lot of food and fashion and travel and lifestyle content. So I'm not sure if you saw from following me on Instagram, but the other day, this guy Martin Schrader, who's a very talented YouTuber and he does Lightroom tutorials, he did a whole tutorial on how I edit my photos.
Okay, we've got another awesome style in
the video is right here on YouTube, and I will link the description for you down below if you haven't seen it. It's pretty cool if you want to check it out. But I figured I'd do my own tutorial. He did a really great job, but he used one of my travel photos from November, and how I edit for travel might be a little bit different than how I edit because I do so many different types of shooting, whether it's indoors, outdoors, travel, food, what have you. So I figured I would just kind of show you my process and how I use Lightroom and what I would do. So I've selected this photo here. This is my friend Anna. Her name's Food Diva on Instagram. Hi, Anna. So this is the before and this is the after of this photograph, and I'll walk you through how I kind of went from this to this. So I'm going to reset this photo, and you can see this is what it looked like before. So this is what it looks like coming straight out of the camera, which is not bad. I mean, I like it. And even in terms of my own editing, I like to keep it kind of as close as possible to coming straight out of the camera. But I do definitely have my own style and aesthetic. Namely, I like having bright photos, almost slightly overexposed. And I like to have a little bit of a pink kind of blush, very warm feeling to my photos. And how I've edited has obviously changed over time. Even how I edited like months ago, a year ago is very different. Even editing in Lightroom. So if you guys are not familiar with Lightroom, you need to check it out. It's such a great program. And I'm also shooting in RAW, whereas before I used to shoot in JPEG. So RAW just enables you to have a higher quality photo. You can have so much more control over it and manipulate a photograph as opposed to a JPEG, because with RAW, it captures all of the image data with the camera sensor, and a JPEG is already compressed. So the quality of your photo coming out after the edits is going to be so much better if you shoot in RAW. So just make sure you're shooting in RAW with your SLR camera or with your mirrorless or whatever you're shooting with. Okay, so let me just jump into, after that very, very long intro, jump into editing. Here's the photo. I've resetted it. So one of the first things I always do if I'm posting to Instagram is I'm going to go ahead and crop this photograph to 4:5 or 8:10. And the reason that I do that is because those are the dimensions that Instagram likes. So it's better to crop it here within Lightroom and export it as opposed to cropping it within the app. And this dot is bugging me over here. So I'm just going to do a quick spot removal. That's what I've used here, this spot removal tool. And I'm just going to clone it out. One of the first steps is I always come down here as well to the lens correction area in Lightroom, and I click on enable profile corrections. So you can see in this photo, that's before, that's after. It's a slight difference, but it almost kind of stretches it a little bit out to the end and brightens it a little bit. On this photo, it's not as drastic as it is with some of my other photos. But with my lens, I shoot with a Sigma 35mm f-stop 1.4 lens. There is some natural vignetting with the lens, how it captures images. So enabling profile corrections gets rid of that and just kind of brightens up the corners, unless you want to edit with a bit of a vignette on your photo, which I don't. So I'm coming to sharpening now. I always sharpen my image, and with my lens, it usually seems like I have to come up to about 90. So I do that. And then what I would start with is I have a bunch of presets over here. I bought a Visco pack, and I've bought other presets as I'm still kind of playing around and finding what I like. What I do like is the Visco Q5. There's the full and there's the half for Lightroom. And then what I've done going forward from there is I've tweaked that to my liking, and I've developed and saved my own presets. So I'm going to go and apply this to mine. And as you can see already, it's changed the look of the photo quite a bit. I'm finding this to be very saturated and very warm, and there's a lot of color, and I like to bring that down a little bit. So I'm going to reduce the vibrance by 10. You can already see the effect that that's had on the photo, and I'm going to reduce the saturation by 10 as well. And then what I also like to do to give my photos more definition is to play with the clarity. The clarity kind of darkens certain areas, gives it more definition is the best way that I would describe it, and sharpens it. So let's see what 10 does. I'm a little bit darker, so let's try 20, just because I want it to be a little bit sharper. Okay. Okay. So that's given more definition. I like that. I want to bring up the exposure. As I said before, I like my photos to be bright and slightly overexposed, but bringing up the exposure is going to do that for the entire photo, and you may just want certain areas. So as you can see, it's very much, as I bring it up to where in certain areas of the photo I would like the brightness, it's just making everything a little bit too bright. Let me just try and go up by 2, and then play around with other parts of the photo. So I'm finding the highlights to be very, very bright, and that's because there's a window right behind my friend Anna here, and it's shining a lot of natural light, which is normally good, but in here the highlights are registering to be very high. So let me just bring them down. That's looking a lot better. It's looking a lot more natural. It doesn't look like the areas around me or up top are too blown out. So I brought the highlights down. If I bring them all the way down, you can see what that looks like. If I bring them all the way up, you can see what that looks like. You see how it's affecting the teapot's getting super, super white and bright. My sleeve, this area. So it's just not applying evenly. Same thing with exposure. It just brightens the whole thing. So I'm going to bring only the highlights down to be more in line with, I like that. Okay, so that looks good to me. So lately I've been liking this kind of low contrast look on photos and not having very pronounced blacks. I think in the past I've had very pronounced blacks, and I'm trying to get away from that a little bit. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to bring my blacks up. If I bring it all the way up, you can see. Now, if I bring it all the way up to 100, I don't like this look, just saying, but you can see my hair looks very washed out. Anna's hair looks very washed out. I do want to bring the blacks up quite a bit, but I don't want it to look too washed out. I want it to look a little bit more natural. So let's go to about 65. I like that. Now, I'm looking at myself and my face looks very bright. And because we've already played with the exposure and the highlights, I don't want to touch those just to affect my face and bring that down. So the first thing I'm going to try is to go down to the hue, saturation, and color area. This is probably one of the most fun parts of Lightroom because you can manipulate individual colors. For skin tone, it's the oranges. So I'm going to click on orange, and that will give me the hue, the saturation, and the luminance of the skin tones. Luminance is how bright the color is. So if I bring that up, look how bright I get. If I bring it down, look how dark I get. But it doesn't only affect me, it affects my friends. So I don't want to bring it. So I want to bring it down. So I brought it down about 14. See, that's looking okay. Let's see a little bit. It's looking okay. I think that might be a little too. Let's go negative 25. Negative 20. Super, super slight. And I bet that, you know, most people would not notice this, but it's obviously me, so I notice it. Let's do the saturation. It's way too pale. Oh, you can see this is pretty neat. You can see how it's affecting the saturation of the rest of the photograph. That's because I guess it was shot at a time when it was quite warm, so it's registering a lot of orange in the photo. So if I mess around with the saturation here, it's really gonna mess around with many areas in the photo. So I'm just gonna reset that. And let's see if we bring it up just a tiny, tiny bit. Okay. Another thing I like to do or play around with just to see what it does to the photo is this dehaze. I find it to be kind of similar to clarity in that it gives some definition to the photo. So if I click on that, and if you've shot, as its name suggests, if you've shot and there's a haze over the photo, it will get rid of that by increasing it. So if we go 20, what does that do? Yeah, so that just kind of darkens and gives more definition to certain areas in the photo. I find that to be a little bit too much, especially since I've gone through so much trouble to brighten up a lot of the areas. So let's just see what 10 does. Okay to me. And I like that actually. And I think that's kind of corrected what I was having a problem with in terms of my face not being defined enough for my skin tone. And then that's given Anna a nice tone as well. Let's see if I want to brighten that up a little bit more. Okay, so brightening is just brightening me too much. Okay, so I think what I want to do in light of this is I'm really liking, you know, how I'm looking, my color, Anna. The blacks are looking okay to me. Let's see what the whites, bringing the whites down. Oh, that looks... Let's undo that. I'm gonna bring the whites down a bit. So this is not a typical Dine Fash photo. I like it to be a little bit brighter than it is, but I don't want to brighten up the entire thing. So what I'm gonna try and do is just brighten up this wall. And also the photo is very warm, and even though I do like a bit of a blush or pink kind of overlay or pink in the highlights of my photo, I'm finding this to be a little bit too much. And when I exported it and compared it to some of my recent posts, it was a little bit too pink. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go in and I'm going to use my adjustment brush, because that will allow me to actually isolate one certain area of the photo and manipulate that area. So as you saw before, when I was messing around with the highlights, it was bringing this area up, which is what I want to achieve now, but it was also affecting my sleeve and the teapot. So I'm going to go in manually and brush. Now you can't see what I'm doing, so I'm just going to use the control panel and turn it up so you can see where I'm brushing. And you just go in and brush over the area that you want to affect. So I'm just doing a really quick job here. I don't want to paint over my friend too much. And the nice thing about this tool is if you do make little mistakes, it's not a problem to go back in and fix them. And I'll show you exactly how to do that in a second. So let me get in here. And already this is looking better to me because I like that brightness in the photo. And this is the area that I wanted to target. Okay, if you want to see where you have brushed over, what you do is hit the O key. That makes everything red. So I can see the areas that I've missed, which I'll go in and touch up. And then when I want to erase, you hold on or hold the Alt key, and that shows you that. And you can change the size of the eraser. If you have a mouse with a roller ball, you can just roll it up and down to change the size. And I like to make the eraser a little bit smaller so I can refine my erasing. And I'm just gonna go in and erase. Make that a little smaller, even smaller yet, over my hat and my face and my hair over here and my hand. And this does not have to be 100% perfect. I'll show you guys once I take the O key off. Especially if you're posting on Instagram, because it will end up being so much smaller and you're not going to really see all these tiny little lines, obviously. So let me get that off of Anna's face and her hair. And there. Okay, so I'll take O off, and that's the area that I'm going to be affecting. So I'm gonna use the control panel over here and you can see what I can do with it. So if I bring the slider down on exposure, you can see obviously how dark it's getting, and if you bring it up, you see how bright it's getting. So I want to bring the brightness up on that. That's a little too much. I like around 50. That looks good. And I also wanted to bring the saturation down on this because, like I said, when I exported it the first time, it was registering a little bit too pink. And this makes it appear more white. So that's just kind of a little trick if ever you want to whiten an area of your photo. You can do it that way with Lightroom. Let me just refine in here a little bit. And I am okay with that. Now I am finding that the blacks are still a little bit too dark. And I've already brought the blacks up to 65. So I'm going to alter the shadows because again, I don't want my blacks to be too dark. I'm trying to get away from that and make this like a low contrast looking photo. Let's see what 0 is again. So you can see the difference there. And then if I bring it up like that, maybe even 20. That looks good. Okay, the other thing I wanted to show you guys really quickly is the tone curve, and I'm still learning how to use the tone curve, so I'm by no means a master at this at all. But what I do know is that the end here, so once you have anchor points, like normally there would not be anchor points, but because I've started with a preset, it came with its own anchor point. So down here on this side, this is where the shadows are. And the black. So I've been kind of playing around with this part of the tone curve lately to achieve the look that I'm going for. And I'll show you, like if I bring it all the way over here, look how basically the blacks are very, very faded, and that's a little bit too much for me. And if you bring it up, it goes in the other direction. So I am liking there. I don't know if that made that much of a difference, but let's see. A tiny difference. So I'm going to redo that. And it's all very slight and subtle, and Lightroom is all about personal preference, and the way I look at it is no two photos are ever the same. Even when you go to re-edit one of your photos, you don't always end up where you ended up the first time. Okay, so that's looking pretty good to me. I'm happy with that. Maybe I might want to take the saturation down a little bit more and see. Okay, I like that. Let's see the before and after. So you can see quite the difference there. I like that the after has a softer, less contrast. The blacks are not as dark. There's a nice light coming in. It's kind of, like I said, softer. And it has a little bit of that pink hue, even though we did take this area and reduce the saturation and turn up the exposure. So I would be happy with this, and I would export this to post it on Instagram. So the way that I would do that is I would go into File, I'd go Export, and you choose the folder where you want it to go, and I have a folder on my desktop to post on Instagram. That's where it'd go, and I will name this the Walton. Let's call this the Walton 6 because I have different versions of this photo. So you're saving in JPEG. I leave the quality at 100%. I'm not resizing this image. If I was posting this to my blog, I would resize it. And in fact, these are not the dimensions that I would even use for my blog. But yeah, we're not doing that for this, so I will not click that. And I have sharpen for screen at high, and I click export. And that's pretty much it. So like I said before, Lightroom is pretty much like a creative process. It's very personal, subjective to you, what you like. And in terms of editing, it's an ever-evolving process. How I edited months ago is not how I edited now, and likely not how I'm going to edit in a year from now. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this tutorial. If you're not already using Lightroom, you should. It's totally addictive. I'm having so much fun with this program, and I hope that I've taught you a thing or two about Lightroom. And of course, if you did like this video, please make sure to give it a thumbs up and let me know in the comments below so I can continue making videos like this for you. And of course, please don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. So that's all for now, guys. Thanks so much and have a great day.